Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 87. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Monday, Steelers Nation, as we had kind of a quiet weekend, and not true football. There were the Pro Bowl games, and that ended with the flag football. The NFC one got to see Russell Wilson, Minkah Fitzpatrick, and others, though, on a football field for the last time of the 2024 season, last time until the team hits OTAs come this spring. Dave, a couple things to talk about. We do have a coaching change. Wasn't one that we really expected or anticipated or advocated for, but there is the Steelers' first, at least, coaching subtraction, which will lead to an eventual addition of the season. How you doing, Dave?
Happy Monday. Yeah, kind of a quiet weekend overall. First one really without any football, so to speak. That'll obviously change this week with the teams in New Orleans for the Super Bowl, and starting up with Radio Row this week. So it'll be a little bit more interesting. Maybe we'll get a few Steelers down there doing because you'll get guys down there promoting stuff on Radio Row. Maybe we'll get a few Steelers talking to the media and can cover that through some major media interviews this week. And then obviously Sunday will be the Super Bowl, so we've got an interesting weekend ahead of that. And as you mentioned, there's some news to talk about with the deletion of at least one position coach to start the week off with.
I feel like the Pawn Stars meme, and I can say that because you're in the Vegas area, probably not too far from that shop, where they say, we want a coaching change. And Rick says, best I can do is losing Aaron Curry. That's what happened to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Curry, whose contract appears to have expired, is leaving the Steelers for the same role with the New York Jets and Aaron Glenn and his new coaching staff he's building up there. So it does not seem like this was where he left and he was under contract or anything like that. So that's why Pittsburgh could not have blocked the move. I got a question about that. Could they have blocked the move? Expiring contract, not going to apply here. But bottom line is Pittsburgh losing what seemed to be a solid linebackers coach. Curry, young, former first-round pick of Seattle, had coached a couple of years before coming to Pittsburgh and Charlotte, and then returning to the Seahawks, was hired 2 years ago by the Steelers to replace the departed Brian Flores, and worked with, of course, Peyton Wilson and Landon Roberts and Patrick Queen this season. So Pittsburgh will at least have a new off-ball linebackers coach in 2025.
Yeah, and it would be nice if we had a full list of when exactly all these contracts expire and how long they did this guy for and how long they did that guy for. But it was a bit of a surprise for this team to lose Curry. I thought as a whole for the couple of seasons that he was in Pittsburgh, he did a good job. But then kind of rolling back in my head and some of the things that Art Rooney II recently talked about, and specifically guys not in gaps, and we have to find out why that happened. I do wonder how hard maybe they tried to get Curry to re-up, and maybe it was more of a mutual type situation. Well, we obviously don't know, but the fact of the matter is he's now out of Pittsburgh, and you've got a room there that you do have a few kind of questions about, because you got a Landon Roberts set to be unrestricted free agent, and all signs point to him wanting to return, and we'll have to see if that comes to fruition. Obviously, you got Patrick Queen going into a second year with the team. You've got Peyton Wilson going into his second season. You got Tyler Matakevich was really just a special teams acquisition. I think he's an unrestricted free agent. So going to probably be, potentially another piece or two in that room. Moving into 2025, we'll see what happens, obviously, with the Landon Roberts, and then more than anything, we'll wait to see who the new position coach is for that position.
And Mark Robinson, heading to the final year of his rookie contract, obviously special teamer primarily, played just a handful of snaps, some specialty run packages very late in the season. Yeah, it's always tough, Dave, to evaluate position coaches. You know, you can look at the body of work from the players themselves, and coaches aware that. Obviously, they become partially responsible for the on-field result, but how much of those issues or even the good plays are because of great coaching or just because of the talent of the players themselves succeeding or failing, always up for debate. The further you get removed from the head coach, the harder it is to really attribute success or failure of the team, of a unit, to a coach, going from head coach to coordinator to positional coach to general offensive or defensive assistant. But by my estimation, Curry was a good coach. You'd see him at training camp. Not that it's much of a coach being on the field early, but we always talked about Peyton Wilson being first guy out at training camp to go through drills. Curry was always there, putting him through those paces, half hour, 45 minutes before practice. I did think the unit generally played well this year. Peyton Wilson had a fine rookie season. Patrick Queen was up and down, but first year for him, wearing the green dot lot on his plate. Landon Roberts was excellent and thumping against the run as always. So Curry's a guy to me that frankly kind of had some vibes of eventual defensive coordinator in the NFL. Felt like one of Pittsburgh's better coaches. If you were ranking the coaches, I think people would probably put Curry closer to the top than the bottom. But either way, he left. Now, as you said, it's always hard to guess out these contracts, but this is more reinforcement that positional coaches in Pittsburgh at least signed 2-year deals. He was in Pittsburgh for 2 years, and his contract seemingly expired, and now he's exiting for the Jets. And so the general rule of thumb, and I'm always hesitant to declare these things because situations can change, is coordinators in Pittsburgh signed 3-year deals. We know Arthur Smith signed a 3-year deal that was announced by the team. Positional coaches signed 2-year deals, and that seems to be holding true with Curry.
And one other note about that, talking about Mark Robinson, he does have 1 year left on his rookie deal.
Right, he's heading into his last year, right?
Right. Heading into last year of his rookie deal. So, look, I guess the question is do we think this team, before we talk about possible replacements here, is it possible that this team addresses the inside linebacker position at some point during the 2025 draft? To add a body in that room. And, I think a lot of that will probably depend on what happens with Landon Roberts, because once again, you got Patrick Queen under contract. You have Peyton Wilson under contract. You have Mark Robinson under contract, even though he hasn't played a lot at the position, but he has been around for numerous years. And then we'll obviously see what happens with Landon Roberts.
Yeah, I think to your question, and you hit the nail on the head, Dave, what happens with Roberts? If he stays, if he resigns, then I really don't see a compelling need to draft the position. Maybe with one of those 7th-round picks Pittsburgh got in the Kenny Pickett deal, you could take a flyer if the board fell right, if that's where the talent is at, but unlikely if Roberts resigns. Now, if he doesn't, if he does leave for whatever reason, and maybe losing his inside linebackers coach's incentive to go somewhere else. I don't know if the Jets have a particular need for an off-ball linebacker, but I don't know their situation entirely. Mosley's been hurt. Sherwood had a good season for them. But anyway, if Roberts leaves, then Pittsburgh has really enjoyed the 3-man rotation at inside linebacker each of the last 2 years. They've really prioritized that. So could they look to add? They certainly could. Now, there's also Cole Holcomb. We assume he's going to be released, but we shouldn't completely discount him, given he's still on the roster right now, missing all of 24 with that knee injury suffered in November of 23.
Yeah, I almost did forget about him. And that is, you would kind of wonder with the salary that he's set to make, that if he does return, they might try to get him to take about a half of that cut. But that's part of the group of guys that we kind of outlined, wondering if the start of the new league year. In other words, we should probably have our answer of Cole Holcomb, probably by the middle of March, by the start of the new league year of what's going to happen with him.
That would make sense. We don't know exactly when that roster bonus is due, correct?
Was he one of the ones we kind of questioned on? I think. Let me see here real
I
quick.
don't think there was a mid-March date attached to him. I could be wrong if you can check.
Right, it's a $2 million roster bonus with him. I'm not seeing a date attached to him, so that might be more tied to the whether or not he makes the 53-man roster or not.
But just given his contract in general, like you said, you probably would make a decision on him sooner than later.
Right. Now, yeah, obviously you hope, and he was one of those ones I think that was able to at least start practicing again at the end of the season. So would more than be well beyond a full year recovery from that knee injury, and hopefully he's progressing well from at least a health standpoint.
So is it possible you hold on to Holcomb until you figure out if Roberts resigns or not? Maybe once you resign Roberts, there's your three. Holcomb really has no role. Number four, not going to be a big special teams guy with the injury. Maybe that's when you cut Cole Holcomb.
Yeah, but if you're looking at based on salaries, does it feel like a guy like Roberts, who's played the amount of snaps that he's played, is going to look at that $6 million that Holcomb's earning? Is Roberts worth $6 million?
I mean, he signed a pretty cheap deal, and he is right around 30, I believe. I don't think he'll be using Holcomb's contract as a gauge.
Right.
I'm not entirely sure what the market value is. I guess with the way salaries have gone up, I mean, what was the last deal that Roberts signed? Was it around 4 million per year? I want to say so. Maybe we're looking at something similar again.
Let's see, what was Landon Roberts? It was a fairly inexpensive deal. It
Hmm.
feels like it was had a APY of $3.5 million, 2 years, $7 million contract with 2.335 guaranteed, with that being the signing bonus. So it feels like his market value with maybe inflation at its most would be really kind of what he earned last season, which was $3.5 million.
Yeah, I could see something similar. So again, I just think for the team, until they kind of get their ducks in a row, they may hold on to Holcomb if there is no soon to be due date on that roster bonus until you, because if you lose Roberts, then do you potentially carry Holcomb at least and just kind of see his continued rehab and recovery and figure out could you have him as an occasional number three linebacker that rotates in?
I suppose, but he's definitely would have to play some special teams, you would think, right?
I mean, probably some, perhaps. Roberts occasionally he was getting a little bit of work on the punt coverage team, so Holcomb may have to do the same. But I think the real value, the real incentive to keep him would be to preserve that 3-man rotation, and maybe Holcomb would be more the clear number three. Obviously, Queen, your every down guy. Peyton Wilson, year two should see that role ascend. Um, but Holcomb maybe could have a minor role rotating in nickel packages or something like that.
Let's see. Today's February the 3rd, the start of the new league year. What's the date of the start of the new league year?
It's mid-March, the 14th. I'd have to look it up. I'm not
All right.
positive.
So we're about what, 6 weeks away. So
Hmm.
from that, so we'll start getting the pieces of this puzzle put together a little bit more within the next 6 weeks. But you went down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out potential candidates of who would now replace Curry, right?
Yeah, it's always needle in a haystack trying to predict these things, and you try to look at colleges, and that's even more vast and expansive. And Pittsburgh really, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, they rarely hire coaches from college to the NFL. I know Canada was an exception, regrettably. Are there any other examples recently of Pittsburgh plucking guys from the college level? I guess Grady Brown, but that was more assistant to start, I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember where some of these guys. I had to pull up a list real quick of where some of these guys came
They
from.
generally seem to be coming just from other NFL teams. So if you look at, just go down the list, Tom Arth. Although I don't know where Eddie Faulkner was. He was not in the NFL, I don't think, before they signed him or hired him. That was years ago at this point, but that's true. Alfredo Roberts, Azani, Pat Meyer, those were all prior, NFL jobs to Pittsburgh. Same with Dunbar, Curry, Terrell Austin, of course, Arthur Smith, just to look at the coordinators.
Yeah, Eddie Faulkner had came from what, NC State?
Right. So that is one college hire.
But you open up, you could go down an endless rabbit hole trying to figure out which college coaches to try to connect to this thing.
Sure, my point is generally they come from the NFL level. So anyway, to answer your point, I put together a list of just kind of some dart throws, just guessing some names, and I think the couple of maybe the I don't know 10 or so I have listed here that are most interesting is Mike Caldwell, formerly of the Raiders. That new coaching staff does not appear Caldwell's returning. He was the Jags DC in 22 and 23. Spent a long time inside linebackers coach with Tampa Bay, the Jets, the Cardinals, Eagles. Been coaching since 2008, played for a decade. Last year with the Raiders, he was the linebackers coach and run game coordinator. So if you want a veteran option, Caldwell to me makes a lot of sense. Matt House from Jacksonville, who I believe is officially out in Jacksonville down there in Duval as Liam Cohen builds his coaching staff. House was the linebackers coach in 2014. He's got some Pittsburgh ties. He was working for the Pitt Panthers on their coaching staff in 2013 and 2014 as their defensive coordinator. He has coached college and NFL, was with the Chiefs for a time. So that's a guy that could make sense. I know many people will start with Gerard Mayo of the Patriots. I wonder if he'll have some options. It does not appear he'll get a DC job anywhere, so maybe he would take a linebackers coach job, but I just wonder if that's not going to be, that just feels too obvious to make that the pick. To me, Dave, the most interesting name of all, if they kind of want somebody like Curry, a little bit younger, good playing. Well, Curry didn't have a great playing career, but playing career, all those kinds of things, kind of more up and comer than established veteran. How about Cato June of the Indianapolis Colts? He's been their assistant linebackers coach since 2022. He's been a longtime coach for over a decade. He's done it all. He's been a high school head coach. He's been a running back coach. He's been a recruiter. He's coached safeties. I mean, the guy has kind of done everything. He's been really highly regarded by the Colts. He survived the new regime to Shane Steichen, praised for his work ethic, his smarts. He was coaching linebackers at the 2024 Senior Bowl, which again is generally viewed as you kind of get some young, rising, ascending coaches, and also has a bit of a Steelers tie as well. June played at Michigan, and during that time at Michigan, his defensive coordinator, Terrell Austin. And so there's a little connection there that may connect and get June's foot in the door. I know connections alone should not be the hiring decision, and obviously it's not here. June has a good resume, but connections do play a part in NFL hires. Grady Brown, for example, knew Terrell Austin. That got him in the door, got an interview in Pittsburgh, and it's why Grady Brown is in Pittsburgh today, for example.
Yeah, that's an interesting one that you that I would have never pegged for you to put on the list. And obviously, he's a former player as well too. Spent all that time in the NFL, so he's got that experience to pull from as well. I don't think other than him. He was drafted by the Buccaneers the year after Tomlin left, right? Or the year that Tomlin left. Tomlin became the head coach in 2007. June went to the Buccaneers. Oh, he was drafted by the Colts, obviously, and then went to the Buccaneers in 2007. So I don't think there was a link Correct. That way. But you were able to tie him to the defensive coordinator, though.
Right, to Terrell Austin. June was actually a safety at first at Michigan. I forget exactly when he made the transition to linebacker, if that was in college or during his NFL career or not, but there is that connection there from way back when. June was also in Indianapolis, coached by one Tony Dungy, who, of course, Mike Tomlin, that was the man who mentored Tomlin, and so I'm sure you could call up Tony Dungy and ask for some information on the type of person that Cato June was for him.
All right, that's an interesting one. I think also on your list, you have a potential maybe either Ryan Shazier or Vince Williams.
That's been one of the more popular names to suggest, so I put it on there in part so I didn't get 74 comments about why I didn't put Ryan Shazier or Vince Williams. Shazier seems to have a full-time role. We've seen him throughout all the training camps, saw him on Hard Knocks. I think he's kind of floated around, worn different hats. I've seen him with the running backs and working with Eddie Faulkner, but he was in those defensive meetings and obviously an inside linebacker himself. Same with Vince Williams, who's been the linebackers coach at Pine Richland High School, unless that role has changed, but obviously former linebacker as well. Feels like it'd be a little too early to get those guys into that full-time off-ball linebacker role job, but you want to mention some of those internal candidates, you should mention, at least acknowledge the possibility of Shazier and Vince.
All right, and why is Shaq Wilson on this list?
Yeah, you want to do a linebackers coach swap. New York Jets assistant linebackers coach last year with Shaq Wilson not being retained by the new coaching staff. Played linebacker in college at South Carolina, had bounced around a little bit, and then got the job when Robert Saleh hired him in 2023. Thought he did well with the linebackers this year with the Jets. Quincy Williams, an All-Pro 2 years ago. James Sherwood went from kind of unknown player to having a really good season when C.J. Mosley got hurt. So again, just kind of speculating, throwing some names out there if they want more of that Curry, young up and comer assistant to linebackers coach. Could look at Shaq Wilson, again, formerly of the Jets.
And I think you have Sean Duggan on here, KJ Wright, and Josh Bynes, both former players, I believe. To potentially who did you could have went five more on this probably, I'm sure. Were there any more that did not make the list that you were close to putting on the list?
There were a couple. One was Donta Hightower, the former Patriots inside linebacker who was on staff with New England last year. I mentioned him in the post, but really didn't officially list him. He lasted just 1 year. He is not returning under Mike Vrabel. I just was reading some comments from Patriots fans and, whatever it's worth. And their impression was that Hightower was not really that good in that role last year. I think even someone made a comment. He admitted he really was new to coaching and wasn't fully understanding the whole job and was kind of learning on the fly. So I just remember, him being that thumping inside backer. Remember Pittsburgh tried to sign him. They had him on the tarmac in Pittsburgh, and Belichick convinced him to go back to New England. So that kind of connection rolled around my brain a little bit, but it felt like probably a little too green for Hightower to go back to an inside linebackers coach role.
All right. Who of the people on your list would you take the dart throw at having the best chance? Cato June, I'm imagining.
I would say two names of the, just again, dart throws, even for those guys, but Cato June makes a ton of sense to me. If you want the younger up and comer, Curry type, if you want the more veteran type, then I would say Mike Caldwell.
Okay. And we've got when does the pro day circuit start here? Pretty quick, I'd imagine, right? Well, that would be after the combine. So after the end of the month here. So we would think that we would get some movement on this here probably within the next, 10 days or so.
Mid-February, I would say, is when those hires will typically come in. So unpredictable exactly the timeline. Obviously, not even sure how much we'll hear about interviews for these things. We may just end up hearing about the actual hire, but we'll see, and we'll let you know.
All right. Good job putting that together. That's tough to do.
Yeah, I went through a lot of coaching staffs, and I was trying to look at like some Wisconsin because they drafted so many Wisconsin linebackers. I think it's like a Bobby April the third, who was the Steelers' former special teams coach. So another name that I considered but didn't put on the list. Where was Bobby April at? There was a reason why I didn't put him on there, and there were so many Bobby Aprils at this point. I'm trying to keep up. He is at Stanford, I believe, as the defensive coordinator and outside linebackers coach at Stanford. So if you want to look at a college name, I considered him, but I wonder if he would leave a D coordinator job, even albeit in college, to go to Pittsburgh and coach off-ball linebackers, possibly. So that's one name I didn't put on there that you should maybe I should have put his name on there just for the hay of it, but another name to consider there.
All right. Is there any other former maybe defensive coordinators floating around or with backgrounds in inside linebackers?
I'm sure there are. I was trying to look through the list of names. There's just so many names to wade through. But I mean, Caldwell was kind of he was not a DC last year, so I guess that doesn't fully apply to your question. But there's probably some other ones out there I didn't consider.
All right.
All right, we shall see, though. All right, Dave, where to from here? The Pro Bowl games were held this weekend. Again, NFC beating the AFC by a video game-like score, but Russell Wilson threw 3-4 touchdown passes. Minkah Fitzpatrick had a pick 6 in this one. We're less concerned about those events and those outcomes, more focused on some of the commentary. Obviously, big media presence down there in Orlando. Sirius had an interview with Russell Wilson. I think the AP talked to him as well and asked about, of course, Pete Carroll, all the buzz about the Raiders. Could Russ and Pete Carroll reunite in Las Vegas? And Wilson was asked about that possibility of going to the Raiders and gave a very Russell Wilson answer of Pete's a great coach, going to do a great job, but I am focused on the Steelers. And so Wilson still fully intending, fully hoping, and angling to re-sign with Pittsburgh.
He make a great politician, wouldn't he? As far as how he handles some of these, the thing that stuck out the most, I think, especially in the serious interview, is how short his answers were. Because if you roll back into this past season with the Steelers, anytime he met with the media, they were long segments. I mean, even post game losses it seemed like they were 13, 14, 15 minutes where he gave long answers. And whereas with the serious, or at least with the interviews that we heard coming out of the Pro Bowl games, they were a lot shorter answers involved. But my main takeaway there is he kept rolling it back to Pittsburgh and even used the we a few times. So he still considers himself, and look, I mean, he's still technically under contract with the Steelers until the start of the new league year. So he was very careful with his answers, especially when asked about the Raiders and Pete Carroll. And he gave the perception that Pittsburgh still, he hasn't written off the possibility of obviously returning to Pittsburgh at this point.
Right, and he still really intends to. He's certainly trying to create that picture of a guy that is going to return and is really angling hard for that. And every answer he's given so far about, with the Pittsburgh media, with the national media. So will it happen? We'll see. The prevailing wisdom and winds have been moving towards Justin Fields, but I don't want to become so hyper focused on, oh, they're just going to resign Justin Fields when Wilson has a close relationship with Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin went to bat for Wilson and obviously started him mid-season. So I don't want to have a blind spot here and just assume that Fields is the guy when, a lot of things have pointed towards Russ being the guy. Anytime a decision has come up, who are we going to start to begin the season? They were going to go with Russ before his calf injury popped back up. Who are we going to start mid-season when Tomlin had every reason to justify sticking with Fields? They went to Russ. They stuck with Russ throughout the entire losing streak. So is it crazy to think it'll be Russ again? It should not be.
Let's real quick take the opportunity to go through these NFL teams of where there could be a potential starting job around the NFL. Obviously not in Buffalo. You would not think in Miami. I think the Jets all depends on what happens with Aaron Rodgers and what they end up maybe doing or not doing in the draft. So the quote unquote Jets, I think you would have to at least consider a possibility of there being a starting quarterback job there, right?
Sure,
Maybe.
especially assuming that Rodgers does not return, which I think is going to be the outcome. We'll see. But certainly if Rodgers does not return, there's a clear need.
All right, obviously not New England, right? With Drake May there, right?
Correct.
All right, AFC North, Baltimore, no. Cincinnati, no. Cleveland, probably not. And obviously Pittsburgh is in that division. Houston, no. You would think Indianapolis, no, right? Jacksonville, no. Tennessee, that's an interesting one, right?
There is a need there, I think. Will Levis, I'm pretty sure they all recognize is not going to be the guy. Mason Rudolph, a free agent. I'll also say on Cleveland, they're probably going to need a quarterback. And I don't think it's going to be Russell Wilson, but it's not going to be Deshaun Watson, and everything else is kind of a mess there. So I don't know how they're going to navigate all that. Could they potentially draft somebody at number 2? If the Titans say go Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter at number 1, that's possible. But I'm going to assume whoever is their week 1 quarterback for 25 is not on the roster in 24.
All right. Moving into the AFC South, Houston, no. Indianapolis, you would think no. I already went through that. Jacksonville, no. Tennessee, we just talked about. The AFC West, Kansas City, No, they got this kid over there named Mahomes is pretty good. The Chargers, no. Denver, hell no. The Raiders, we'll come back to that one. Mark that down to come back to for several reasons here. Moving over into the NFC, Philadelphia, no. Washington, no. Dallas, no. What about the Giants?
Yes, I would expect the Giants to be looking for a quarterback.
All right. NFC South, Detroit, no. Minnesota. What's going to happen in Minnesota? They've got the young kid over there, so it's either if they we'll see what happens with Darnold, but if not, they're probably going to move to the young kid that they drafted there. Green Bay, obviously, no. Chicago, no. NFC South, Tampa Bay, they got Baker there. Atlanta, they got a quarterback there. Carolina, they seem like they're going to move forward with Bryce over there. New Orleans, what's happening in New Orleans?
Not entirely sure Carr's situation. There is also still no head coach, although we assume it'll be Kellen Moore. I'm going to assume, though, that Carr is going to be their guy for 25.
All right, NFC West, the Rams, there's a lot of talk about what's going to happen with Stafford, I suppose.
But it seems like the appetite is to keep Matthew Stafford. They're going to have to rework contract. And I said last time his contract was bloated. I was wrong. It's actually a too small of a contract. They're going to have to try to give him a raise and navigate all that. Again, I'm going to assume that Stafford's the guy until told otherwise.
Okay, moving over, let's see, Seattle. It'd be interesting to see what happens there. Will they move forward with Geno? What does your gut tell you about Seattle? Probably not at this point.
I don't have a great gut reaction to Seattle one way or the other, but I'm gonna assume that Geno's gonna keep starting for them.
All right, Arizona seems like they're not going to do anything over there, and then San Francisco with they got a contract situation I think to figure out with Purdy, but I don't think that's going to be a landing spot for a starter role for Russell Wilson. So how many? And that's all the teams there. So how many potential teams are we looking at here? The Jets, maybe. Tennessee, maybe. The Raiders, maybe. The
I mean, I think these
Giants.
teams are pretty clearly needing a quarterback. I think the Titans clearly need one. The Raiders certainly need one. The Jets will need one if Raj doesn't stay.
The Giants.
Yeah, they need a new quarterback.
I mean,
And that's our list in Pittsburgh.
that feels like the list, right?
Yeah, so that's 6 teams: Jets, Raiders, Browns, Titans, Giants, and Steelers.
All right, and it feels like of those, at least at this point right now, what the Raiders, right, potentially would be at the top. But
You're asking at the top of
what
need?
of a probability of landing spots for Russell Wilson at this point in time?
I mean, the front runners have to be the Steelers and the Raiders, just given the connections to obviously Pittsburgh and to Pete Carroll. Should mention that, and you had called this right from the start, and it felt like this was going to happen, but it pivoted last second that Darrell Bevel was going to return to Pete Carroll, become the OC with the Raiders, and that would also really kind of put the band back together for Russ. But they ended up hiring Chip Kelly and paid him a boatload of money to come to the Raiders.
Yes, that was interesting development on. I think that happened yesterday, Sunday, right?
Correct. $6 million, highest paid coordinator in football.
All right, and if you were to do some quick dot connecting there, considering their situation, it does make you kind of wonder: might they be in the Will Howard running right now? Right?
With Chip Kelly, Ohio State, potentially, for sure. Also, you should mention the Giants at least, and you are, obviously, I'm just saying this third person, as a team member. Russ took a visit with the Giants before he came to Pittsburgh. That was the whole, he was taking a not a coach flight, but a commercial flight from New York or New Jersey to Pittsburgh. So could the Giants happen part 2?
All right. Moving back to the Raiders real quick, though, if they did go, obviously, they would, the draft comes after free agency there. So it would be interesting. Does Does Russell Wilson feel like a fit to Chip Kelly?
Not off the top with the up tempo
Don't they still
nature.
have Marcus Mariota under contract with the Raiders there though? Who
No, he's in
obviously?
Washington.
Oh, okay. But
It's
who is over there? Connell.
O'Connell, Gardner Minshew had signed that 2-year deal this past off season, so those were your two quarterbacks this year with the Raiders. Also, they signed Desmond Ridder very late in the process. He ended up playing a little bit late, but it's been O'Connell and Minshew.
Marcus Mariota is a free agent though this offseason, and he obviously has a history. Could you see something like a Marcus Mariota, Will Howard combination there? Bring Marcus Mariota to maybe a start initially. Would that make sense?
I guess I hadn't spent too much time about the Raiders. I mean, if Will Howard fit Chip Kelly's system, then why couldn't Russell Wilson? I mean, Howard he's a Daniel Jones type of athlete. I profiled him. He's got some athleticism. He's got straight line speed, but he's certainly not this hyper mobile type of quarterback.
I guess where I'm going with this, because of the whole Chip Kelly, if we had recorded this show before the Chip Kelly and after the Darrell Bevell kind of news that came out over the weekend there, I would say, oh, that's probably where he's going to land. But now that it's Chip Kelly, I do kind of wonder, especially kind of wondering, connecting the dots to Will Howard, and what kind of money would they be trying to invest in a veteran like Russell Wilson? I think more than anything, I think this just hurts the potential of Russell Wilson landing with the Raiders.
I suppose it doesn't help. Bevel would have helped more, but why not both? Why couldn't you sign Russell Wilson and draft Will Howard? It's not like, Howard's going to be a first round guy that has to start day one, or that Russell is locked into being your long-term starter for the next 3-4 seasons. He gets a 3-year deal, something like that, maybe 2-year type of a deal. You draft Howard. I think the Raiders are a team like Pittsburgh that needs a lot of options here. Got to try some different things to find their quarterback.
Yeah, but if you spend a lot of money on Russell Wilson, you're probably going to do it with a 2-year plan at least, right?
Sure, we've seen these 2-year plans become 1-year plans pretty
Right.
quickly, and how teams. And again, you can, even if you start Russ for 2 years, Will Howard, if he's a second round guy, not like you have to start him week 1 like he's a top 3 pick.
True. I just wonder all that's happened over the course of this weekend, what that does to the value of Russell Wilson. Because they're technically, I guess it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Jets. The Giants would potentially be. Who would be the top 3 team if you had to pick right now? Who of 3 potential landing spots for Russell Wilson in 2025? What would those 3 spots be?
I mean, they're
That
obvious.
you'd have to bet half your house on.
Okay, well, I'm going to lose probably half my house here with my luck. They're obvious, easy dot connecting, and you can argue any of these teams, but Steelers, Raiders, and Giants are my top 3.
I would agree.
Now, could it be Tennessee? Could they look for a veteran quarterback to try to compete in a somewhat open AFC South? Potentially. The Jets feel less likely overall. They probably want to get younger at quarterback if they're going to turn away Aaron Rodgers and kind of start over there. But again, who knows? Just takes one team. The Browns. What if Russ went to the Browns? That'd be kind of crazy.
That would
probably
be funny.
Too much overall. Probably they probably want to draft a rookie quarterback to be a little cheaper overall than have to sign Russ to this big deal while still having that anchor that is Deshaun Watson's contract. So I would say Cleveland for a variety of reasons. Unlikely. The others, though, I think are all in play.
And I guess as part of this, for some of these teams that we just talked about, how attractive does a guy like Justin Fields become?
More attractive, again, because of the supply and demand of the quarterback market. Your top 3 free agents are Russ, Fields, and Sam Darnold. And that assumes Darnold leaves Minnesota, which is still no guarantee. He could re-up there. Probably lost some money with the way he finished out the season. McCarthy coming off injury. Not going to rule out Darnold reuniting with Minnesota. If he does, then it really truly becomes Russ and Fields and not much else in a draft class that's viewed as weak, that has quarterback needy teams that may not take a quarterback with their top pick, and only 2 first-round guys in Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. And after that, there's a decent drop-off. So people are going to be in demand for these quarterbacks simply because there are few options.
And once again, with the start of the new league year, little less, I guess, around 6 weeks left. The Steelers need to get this put to bed in a hurry.
And that's what Art Rooney said. You want to figure this out, have some clarity there. It's going to help you, obviously, in free agency. It is the first and arguably the most important question for the offseason. Who is going to be your quarterback for 25? You want to get that figured out sooner than later.
Do you think the Steelers have a good idea as of yet?
I thought about that. We've heard a lot from Art Rooney and the team. We're still discussing that. I mean, I get obviously if we discuss that, the contract is a whole nother situation that's going to dictate maybe who stays, how do you get deals done with these guys. But if you're the team, you've watched these guys throughout this entire process. Do you need to take 2.5 weeks to discuss who you want to bring back, who's the first guy you want to approach and extend that contract offer to? Shouldn't it be pretty obvious at this point internally who you want to start working with first?
I would think so. And on the flip side, if I'm one of the two quarterbacks of Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, based on all the teams that we just named off, I'm not just taking the first. I'm definitely exploring what's out there.
Sure. I mean, I get that. Again, I think at the combine is when people talk, and then the entire NFL is in Indy. And so you have a good idea of market value and demand and what teams may be interested in some of those back channel discussions, even though they technically can't happen at the combine. They always do. So I think I don't know if a deal will get done before the combine. I would like to think shortly after you get some clarity. That's kind of the testing the waters part of the offseason very early on, and you re-sign one of these guys.
Right. And as we talked the other day, at least after, through the tampering period. In other words, before actual start of the new league year, you would hope that the Steelers would have one of these two guys or someone else maybe from the outside signed.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna be an outside guy. I think my hope and my goal, if you're Pittsburgh, is before the tampering period even opens up, because you don't want the legal period where teams can really start having talks and officially call agents and start trying to work on some things. You want to have the quarterback locked up, so you don't want to let that guy even really have because the legal tampering period is just early free agency. That's just
Right.
call it what it is. That's basically free agency. So I think Pittsburgh will, and they certainly should have somebody resign by then, before then.
All right. That was worthy of a conversation, especially with Chip Kelly. I was surprised to see him land with the Raiders.
For whatever it's worth, and it's probably very little, but we just talked about Cato June for the linebackers coach job, Dave, and I tweeted about Cato June kind of being a really interesting name. He just liked my tweet. So
Oh,
does
okay.
that mean something? It probably doesn't, but it's a slow Monday. We'll put on some tinfoil hats and pretend that maybe Pittsburgh has shown some interest.
All right. Good on you if you end up hitting that.
I hope so. I think I should have put Bob Grable the third on that list too, because I mean he was at Wisconsin from 2018 to 2022. Just missed out on coaching TJ Watt. He's at Stanford now. He coached linebackers in the NFL a while back. He was at Tulane for a time. He was not there when Omar Khan was there, but little Tulane connection. Could see that happen. So he's also with the Eagles, I think before Andy White, although that was back in 2011, 2012. So just would he leave a coordinator job for the NFL, go coach where his dad used to coach? Maybe.
All right. So did that just happen, or did you
Yeah.
just know it
No, it just happened
real time? Huh?
5 minutes ago. Yep.
All right. Interesting. All right.
Keep your eyes peeled on it. It's probably just someone sent him that, or he saw it somehow and just went, "Oh, somebody recognized me. Cool." But anyway, we'll just pretend it's a lot more than that. I don't want to go through this whole exercise today because it probably just would take too long. But we talked about this whenever we did it back in September, our ranking Russ series. Where would we rank Russell Wilson among the top quarterbacks in football? Back in September, you put him 22nd. I put him 20th. You just had to guess. And maybe we do this exercise later this month because February is a very slow month overall. Do you think Russ would be about in the same spot, higher, lower?
It feels like we about nailed it.
I feel like I might put him a bit lower just based on.
I had him, what,
22nd?
22nd?
22nd. I had him 20th, yes.
Yeah.
Would you put him ahead of, and just kind of some lower end names? You had Kirk Cousins ahead. You had Geno Smith ahead. You had Brock Purdy ahead. Trevor Lawrence ahead. Would you put all those guys ahead of Russ still?
Probably not Cousins. Who else did I have ahead of him? Cousins really, fell off
Mhm.
the cliff there.
So that would put Russ to at least 21st. Would you still put Geno Smith ahead of Russell Wilson?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. Purdy.
Yeah.
Okay. And the rest were pretty obvious. Well, you also had Deshaun Watson ahead of Russ. I assume that would no
Oh,
longer be
yeah.
the case.
Yeah, that would no
Okay.
longer be the case.
So that now puts Russ at 20th on your list without factoring in. Would you put a Drake May? What about some of the rookies, Caleb? Because I think your stance was I'm not going to put any rookies
Right,
ahead. So you would obviously have Jaden Daniels ahead
right.
of Russ. So that puts Russ back into 21st. Some breaking news. What is the breaking news? Myles Garrett has requested a trade. Whoa! Myles Garrett has requested a trade out of Cleveland. He has sent an official statement signed by himself. While I've loved calling this city my home, my desire to win and compete on the biggest stages won't allow me to be complacent. The goal was never to go from Cleveland to Canton. It has always been to compete and win a Super Bowl. With that in mind, I have requested to be traded from the Cleveland Browns. Signed, Myles Garrett.
Wow.
We know he's been making some waves late in the season, unhappiness about the direction of the team, inability to find a quarterback. There was frustration. We talked about would they give him a big mega deal, try to make him happy this offseason? Would TJ Watt need to get that extension soon to not have to then top Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons? Of course, any team trading for Myles Garrett is going to do so with the eye and the lens of signing him long term. But the here and now, and we'll see how the Browns react. They have certainly some leverage here, but Myles Garrett wants out of Cleveland.
All right. Interesting for sure there. So he must not didn't he say he was going to sit down with the organization and kind of get their, viewpoints and all which direction to go on and that kind of thing?
I believe so. And whatever talks happened, if any, did not satisfy Myles Garrett. So we shall see where Cleveland goes from here. He's under contract through at least next season. Not entirely sure his status right
And
now.
he's gonna obviously as part of this, he's gonna want a new deal too. So
Yeah, it'll be immediate with a trade, I assume.
I would assume he's got I wonder if he's got say of where he goes in the clause.
It's a good question. I am not sure on that, but if you're trading for him, even if there is even if there is not a no trade clause, if you're trading for him, you're going to sign him, and so you're going to need a commitment and make sure he's good with this before you deal for him. So there's kind of a de facto no trade clause, even if
Right.
it's not officially codified into his contract.
All right. I wonder how the Browns are going to rebuttal this now.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, if you're the Browns, what do you do? I don't know if you say much at all. It's obviously a pretty quiet time right now. You don't have to say much. When's the next obligation they're going to be interviewed? Owners meetings, I guess the combine. It's probably the next time they'll have to really talk to some and kind of face the media. So they have some time here to probably figure stuff out.
And I think just a few days ago is when Andrew Berry said they made it very clear that they have no plans to trade him.
Right. So that will certainly be tested now. Would not be mad if Myles Garrett left the AFC North.
Or the AFC.
Or the AFC.
That would be quite interesting there. Just trying to roll through my head. Might he want to go play in Detroit?
I have no idea where he wants to play for a winner. That much is clear. So who that is, I have no idea. But he'll want to go play for a team who is going to win and compete.
All right, interesting.
All right, so that's the news. Again, back to Russell Wilson, the list. You put Jaden Daniels ahead of Russ. What other rookies, if any, would you put ahead of Russ? Caleb Williams, Drake May, any other names?
Let's roll through the list here real quick. See if I've got anybody. I'm sure I had Jordan Love ahead of him. I would not put the Chicago's quarterback ahead of him. Bryce Young, no. It feels about. I don't. Where do I have him then? About 22nd, 23rd still. with
After
these
kind of the names, I mean, would you put Caleb Williams and Drake May ahead of Russ?
Caleb, no with Caleb.
What about
Drake
May?
May, possibly. I did not watch enough of him.
Okay, so let's just assume one of those guys May, so that would put Russ back at 22, where you had him to begin the season. So it sounds like Russ is probably about the same place for you.
Yeah.
On my list, some kind of question. I also had Kirk Cousins ahead of Russ. I had Kyler Murray. I think I'd probably still put Kyler Murray ahead of Russ right now. And I had Caleb Williams. I did not have Daniels because I wanted to kind of see. Would I put Caleb Williams ahead of Russ right now? I think I would slightly. Just he was in a disaster situation in Chicago. So I'd obviously put Daniels. I wouldn't have Kirk ahead of him anymore. I also had Anthony Richardson ahead of Russ, and probably wouldn't at this point. Just Richardson is just so volatile. So I'm probably in the same boat where Russ maybe would drop a little bit for me, probably to like 21, 22. I think we'd both be in the same spot right now,
We're,
basically in that 21, 22 range.
and I would imagine we would have Justin Fields pretty close to this.
Yeah, true. That's a good point too. Justin Fields. Who is the better quarterback? Just all things considered, rushing ability too. Who is the better quarterback? Russ or Justin?
I mean, you can't deny what Russell Wilson gives you with the deep ball still. There's a trade-off there. It's the quarterback mobility versus the deep ball aspect, and both are strong selling points for each, right? I mean, it feels like they'd be right there together, to be honest with you. But the two definitely give you different high point plus aspects of their game. Once again, with Russ giving you the deep ball aspect, but Justin giving you the high end mobility.
So if you had to, there are kind of competing factors to weigh. It's harder to do that than just great passer versus great passer. But
I
who
mean,
do
you
you
have to
think?
give the nod to Russell Wilson just on the experience and the the autonomy, and he's seen more the lead, the leadership aspect. I think I would still and I'm talking just barely, have Russell Wilson ranked higher than Justin Fields.
Yeah, I think
It's
I
tough
would.
because there's two different games that you're talking about here, and obviously we didn't see the Steelers use Justin Fields to his maximum. In other words, we when he was the starter, did we actually see them build around his strengths the way they probably should have?
Sure, and that's fair. But in fairness to them, they had gone into the entire offseason preparing for Russ to start. And then that curveball kind of hit him with Fields last second with the injury. And then Russ was going to start week 1. Then 3 days before the regular season began, Russ aggravates the calf again. Your game plan's already put in place. You're kind of scrambling from there. I think I'm with you where I'd put Russ slightly ahead just as a passer. Some of those intangibles, you know, would elevate him over Fields, even knowing the great threat that Justin Fields is as a runner. But the question then becomes, to take it back to Pittsburgh in the future, is who are you betting some future returns on? Russ,
Right.
will he decline? Will Fields get better? And maybe by the end of next season, Fields is clearly the better quarterback than Russ. And so you could have an answer of say that Russ is the better quarterback now by a narrow margin and still advocate for Fields to resign, because it's not just about where you're at, it's where you're going. And that could give Fields the edge.
Well, and also too, it'd been nice to be able to have this conversation had they ran the offense more around the mobility of Justin Fields when he was the starter.
Do you think the fact that this was a late situation for Fields to start played a factor in maybe muzzling some of that, and also the fact of,
Possibly,
okay,
yeah.
your starter is kind of thrust in there kind of late in this process, was not really the plan whenever he was acquired by Pittsburgh, and wasn't the plan right before the season began. Also, our backup quarterback is hurt. He's the emergency number 3. Do we want to have a lot of quarterback runs that now risk the health of our starting quarterback, Fields? And if he goes down, then we're kind of left with a half injured quarterback in Russ, an injured quarterback in Fields, and Kyle Allen's now trying to carry this thing. So I wonder if that maybe had an impact in let's not run as much with Fields because we need to make sure this guy stays healthy.
I suppose that could be part of the equation. And then you keep going back to what Art Rooney just said recently about wanting to have both quarterbacks run the same system, right?
Right. That is true. If you go from Fields to Kyle Allen, you're running a different system.
Right.
And you're
So
on quarterback number 3 in a short time span.
look, if you could guarantee me that that obviously what you Russell Wilson's tapped out. And we knew that going into this season, you're going to have to build around his strengths, with the primary one being the deep ball aspect and his experience and his the ability to have the autonomy with him. That's not changing at this point, right? Russ is who he is. You'd like to think that you know a lot about Justin Fields at this point, but in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform, have they explored, more of what might still remain on his ceiling revolving around the mobility, and that's the slippery slope here moving forward.
Right. There's more meat left on that bone with Justin Fields, more potential. Although, was it Bill Parcells that said a potential is just a bunch of stuff you haven't done yet, and so that's always the carrot you're chasing. You're right. Russ is a narrowly limited player in success in terms of if you're playing man coverage, if you're playing a bunch of cover one, Russ can pick you apart. If you're playing a lot of zone and taking away the vertical deep ball, Russ is going to struggle. That was shown, I think, very clearly this year. Some of the studies we've done have illustrated that his man versus zone splits, for example, I think are pretty stark. And so Russ can win and be really high level, but it's a very narrow way of him doing that, a narrow path to get there.
And if you're us looking ahead to what maybe if the Steelers were to land with one of the two, you have to kind of qualify that saying, well, if they build more around the strengths of Justin Fields, would you be wanting to go that way because you already know what you have and don't have with Russell Wilson? It leads you to hoping that Justin Fields is the next guy with the qualifier of they've got to build around what his strengths are.
Sure, but I get that. You want to surround him with talent and allow. What do you think
Both
though
of them
that
need
means?
more talent around them, period.
Yeah. So what does it mean to say to build around the strengths of Fields? How do you do that? Obviously he's mobile, but what does it look like to build around the strengths of Justin Fields?
I think just use that mobility more of the zone read, more of the quick game. Obviously you got to have a better running game for both those guys, period. You have to have, both those guys are going to need at least two wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to upgrade the bottom end of your tight end depth chart. Your offensive line has got to take the next step forward with all the investment in it. Both of those guys need more in that offense to do more than what they did in 2024, right? So it would look more of the moving pocket with Justin Fields, just moving more off of the mobility, more of the zone reads, taking advantage of not having to. Remember Mike Tomlin talking about Justin Fields and saying, well, we like the mobility, but he's got to use it. You got to turn him loose. You've got to have a situation where Justin Fields feels like, oh man, if it's not there and I take off, am I going to get benched? Am I going to get chided for that? And it feels like he had kind of the handcuffs on early, to start the season, where it came to, yeah, we like that mobility, but use it as a last resort.
Yeah, I still need to study that. I mean, Fields, I know you're right. Some of those rush attempts during his 6 starts were scrambles, but they did run design quarterback stuff for him. I'll have to really dive into how many of those were design runs and how many of those were scrambles because he carried the ball a ton.
Right.
And again, you're right. Some of those were scrambles, which is always part of his game. It's always an asset to have, and the way the teams play you coverage wise, the way they have to rush is all different to account for that. So those are a real tangible threat. But I mean, he had in those first 6 games, how many carries did he have? I think we talked about the number on on a previous show, he had, 55 over 6 games. I mean, that's a pretty healthy number.
Right.
It's 9 per game.
Which one has you, with all things being equal with what they would do the rest of the offseason, which one would have you more excited to be back, and tampering that with us saying that we still probably don't think, this will end up being a team that can make a deep run in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all to say that the franchise quarterback is probably neither of these guys. He's likely in college or maybe even high school or something right now. Fields is an easy answer to say more
Right.
excited, because if you bring back Russ, like you said, you know what you're getting with him. You're bringing back the guy that was spearheading a 5-game losing streak, the worst collapse, I would argue, in Steelers history, at least right up there. And so Fields more athletic, younger, cheaper, all those things have you more excited. But again, some of that's about potential and things you haven't done yet. The big issue I have, the big concern I have with Russ is that he can still move. He is not a statue, but his mobility is declining. And that is not going to get better. That is going to get worse. And he is a guy that likes to run, that likes to scramble and create. Not always run to take off and, juke out a guy, but to leave the pocket is what he likes to do. He is comfortable and frankly often dangerous when he leaves the pocket. But as that mobility declines, it's going to be harder for him to get away from guys, harder to make those types of plays. And you have a quarterback who wants to be mobile on declining mobility. And I said it when they signed him. He tries to run like he's 25. He writes checks. His legs can no longer cash. That is not going to get better as you get older.
Right. I would agree. I would agree.
So that is the concern with bringing back Russ, even though I think 1-to-1 in a vacuum, who is the better quarterback, all things considered right now, I still probably would give Russ the slight edge, but is that going to be true after 2025? Maybe not. And Russ is likely to be the more expensive quarterback to re-sign of the two as well. Another reason to consider Justin Fields.
I would agree.
All right, that's a good discussion there. Anything else, Dave?
This surprise with this Myles Garrett thing. You never know what you're going to wake up to this.
On Super Bowl week, going to get a lot of talk here, I'm sure.
I wonder if he'll be. Wonder if he's going to be. I mean, the timing of this. Look, the timing of this is absolutely fantastic on Myles Garrett's part, right?
Not a coincidence to do this Monday, Super Bowl week.
Right. And I do wonder now if he's going to be down on Radio Row, because this is going to be all the buzz now, or if he's just going to let the buzz. Will he be down at Radio Row giving interviews, or will he let the buzz of it take care of itself? So that'd be interesting to watch, I guess.
He'll be at NFL Honors. He's up for Defensive Player of the Year, right? So he'll be in the spotlight of some degree, and he'll be down there, right? So I don't know exactly how much he intends to speak, but if I was his agent, yeah, I'd give an interview or two. I'd explain the situation. I mean, he gave the statement obviously here, but I think if you're Garrett, you want to present your perspective and keep some heat on Cleveland, so the story does not. It's not that it's going to go away, but you want to make sure that heat stays on the Browns.
Boy, what are Browns fans feeling this morning? Woo!
Sad, which is a feeling they have known all too well for the last 30 years.
All right, where to from here?
That's basically all I had right now. I've gone through some draft stuff. I have a report up on Maxwell Hairston. Hairston's a guy that was pretty popular mock to Pittsburgh throughout the season. He's a really interesting ball hawk corner from Kentucky, not super big. Really good in the zone scheme. Pittsburgh ran a ton of, zone cover 3 last year. That's where I see Hairston fitting best. That's a guy that I'd be intrigued by on day 2.
All right. I did not have a chance to dive deep into any film this weekend. I got tax stuff I'm working on, and payrolls due, and I got out of the house on Sunday. So we do have some roundtable stuff coming up this week, hopefully, right?
Right. Well, should be Wednesday Shrine Bowl discussion and Friday Senior Bowl discussion. We're firming up those things right now. Did you watch the Senior Bowl? At least, obviously, a great story with Jack Beck catching the game-winning touchdown in honor of his brother who died in those terrorist attacks in New Orleans. Along with that, it looked like Ty Robinson, your guy, had a decent day. Landon Jackson, the edge, how the Pittsburgh's going to be drafting an edge rusher early, was impressive. Anything else stick out to you, Dave?
Darius Alexander showed up, a couple of big plays that we had talked about recently out of Toledo. Who is he? Zabel kid. What's his last name? The kid out of North Dakota State.
Isn't it Greg? Is it Greg? Zabel?
Uh,
Gray Zabel.
Gray Zabel, yeah. He represented himself real well. I was hoping that the all 22 from the Senior Bowl would be out by over the weekend, and I checked, and I have not seen it yet. Overall, so I did watch quite a bit of that. I thought with Betch. Great. I thought overall the game was a lot better. I mean, it was definitely better than the Shrine Bowl game because that was one-sided, and for the Senior Bowl to come down to the final play, I thought was very entertaining within that, especially with the storyline with his brother and all getting killed in New Orleans and all like that. So I am interested to get a hold of the all 22 from the Senior Bowl, though.
Jalen Milroe looked like Jalen Milroe, some accuracy issues. And so, there was also, whatever it's worth, from Mike DeFabo of The Athletic. He had pushed back on an earlier report, quote unquote, report from Andrew Filippone. He said the Steelers had loved Milroe. DeFabo countered that and said that is the opposite of what I'm hearing. This team is not high on Milroe. They believe he will get drafted much earlier than they will be comfortable selecting him, essentially saying they believe he'll be overdrafted. And so it does not seem like they love Milroe. I thought maybe they would. Who knows exactly the truth? But me watching the tape, this is not a guy I'm drafting in the first 2 days.
I would agree with you there. And what little I know about Will Howard, I think I would definitely take Will Howard ahead of him. Dart, I think I would take ahead of him as well too. And I do wonder, just because of supply and demand and the importance of the position, if you'll see quarterbacks, some of these quarterbacks overdrafted. I mean, you go back to, it kind of feels like we're in the same boat as the Kenny Pickett class, right?
It is similar. I would say this class is probably regarded as stronger. You're likely to see 2 first-round quarterbacks go in 2022. There was one Pickett, and very arguably he should not have been a first-round quarterback. I think Pittsburgh may have been the only team to take him in the first round. We'll never know for sure, obviously, but it is similar. It is not viewed as a strong class. I would say, though, if you made me compare, this year's class is stronger than 22. Maybe that's the benefit of hindsight, knowing the 22 class was a complete disaster besides Brock Purdy, who no one talked about pre-draft. I mean, this no one has done anything in this class. I think 24 is a little bit stronger, at least in the top end.
Who was the second quarterback taken in the pick? Was that Ritter?
I think it was Ritter.
In the third round, right?
Yeah, there was no one in the second round, and then it became Ritter. Howell, I think, waited till the 5th. I think Willis might have been after that.
Willis was in the third.
Matt Corral went. Where did Corral go?
He went in the third, late in the third, to the Panthers.
Okay, and that was basically the bulk. And then, of course, Purdy ended up being the Mr. Relevant and the best pick of them all.
Right.
But a historically bad class, one of the worst quarterback classes from a results-based standpoint, probably in the last 40 years.
Right. Sam Howell went first pick of the 5th round that year. Who went before him? Trying to scroll back up through this. Thought there was one taken in the 4th round somewhere. Oh, Zappi.
Oh, Bailey Zappi. Right.
He was at the end of near the end of the 4th round.
Frankly, he's had one of the better careers, which was a low bar. He has not had a good career, but relatively speaking, it's I guess it is a bit better than most others out there.
Who else was taken later in that draft?
That Oladokin.
Oh yeah,
but Purdy was the name there. But Purdy was not. I'm sorry, Purdy was not Mr. Relevant, was he?
Yes. Purdy was Mr. Relevant that year.
That. Okay, all right. So
Skylar Thompson went 7th round that year.
Few current Steelers, Skylar Thompson. How about that? Anybody? Yep. Any of the quarterbacks go? Is that the whole quarterback draft? Can't think of any other names, but maybe there's one.
You hit on Oladokin in the 7th already. Yeah.
All right. So hopefully 24 is better. We'll see if Pittsburgh has interest, and we'll go from there.
All right. Shall we get to a couple of quick reader emails here?
Yep. Let's get to some emails and close out tonight's show. Today's show, I should say. Speaking of tonight, no live stream. That's part of our schedule, but just always want to give that call out for those who are unsure. No live stream tonight.
All right, Dan Devlin writes in, thank you for the great coverage and your opinions about what the Steelers should be do to be more competitive moving forward? Let's see. Number one, he's got Steelers are not Super Bowl contenders as things stand. How many teams are contenders? Oh man, that's tough. I mean, I think you got to look at the teams that were released into playoffs this year. Now, obviously, there's going to be some changes, and I think historically, in there like every year, 2 or 3 teams that made the playoffs the previous year don't end up making the play. It's so hard to because we are so hyper focused on the Steelers, and even though we do cover the rest of the NFL per se, to sit here right now and say which teams are and aren't. I mean, I think you got to look at the quarterback situations first and foremost, right? And say whether or not you think teams are Super Bowl contenders. So, I mean, obviously the Chiefs, I think the Chargers. I mean, let's roll through them real quick. Of Buffalo, would you put Miami with Tua? I don't know if I'd put them as a Super Bowl contender.
No.
Baltimore, obviously, you'd put as a contender. I think Cincinnati, you'd put as a potential Super Bowl contender. Would you put Houston in the batch of Super Bowl contenders?
I mean, it depends how you define it. Loosely, yes, but are they in a tier 1 Super Bowl contender? They are not. So I would not put them in that camp. No, it should be a short list of Super Bowl contenders.
Right. I mean, Jacksonville, even though they got quote unquote, what they think with Lawrence, you get to think they go 4-13 to a Super Bowl contender with a new staff. I think that's a little rich there. Kansas City, yes. Chargers, maybe. What about Denver?
Not Super Bowl contender yet. They got to win a playoff game. There's got to be some walking or some crawling until they can start walking and running.
Philadelphia, Washington.
Yes, they're both Super Bowl contenders.
What about Dallas because of Dak?
No, he hasn't gotten them anywhere close so far. He obviously was hurt this year. No, they are not Super Bowl contenders.
Detroit.
Yes.
Minnesota. All depends.
True, but 14-3. I'll put it back on a yes for next year.
Green Bay.
That is interesting. Do you consider the Packers Super Bowl contenders? I think they're in a Houston type of camp where they are not one of those tier 1 teams. So I will say no, but they're obviously a good team, probably still on the rise.
How about anybody out of the NFC South? Tampa Bay.
No, none of the South teams.
The West, the Rams.
Do I consider the Rams Super Bowl contenders? They're probably like Green Bay, but they're an older version of them. I think it should be a short list, so I will say no. I think they're in a second tier.
What about the 49ers?
I think, assuming good health for next year, I'd still put them in that camp, yes, despite the 6-11 season. They just were so beat up this year. So I know it's kind of crazy to say about a team that finished last in the division. But, if they're healthy, I mean, given where they were before, I put them in the contender camp, sure.
All right. What about slam dunk Super Bowl contenders? Buffalo, yes. Baltimore, yes. Cincinnati, would you put Cincinnati in there?
Not slam dunk, no.
Okay, so we're at Baltimore and Buffalo. Nobody out of the South. Kansas City, yes.
Yes.
Chargers?
No, not like Bengals, not slam
All
dunk.
right. Philadelphia?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
All right, that's 5 teams. Detroit?
Yes.
Nobody else out of the North, right?
Would you put Minnesota? Slam dunk? I would not say slam dunk.
I wouldn't either.
Green Bay. I assume that one Green Bay too.
Yeah. And then I guess it's borderline with San Francisco. So we're talking about 6 teams there, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't put the Niners in slam dunk right now. Too much projection. It is an older roster. So yeah, I mean, it should be a short list, and those are your 6.
All right. Next, he's got Steelers are division and playoff contenders, correct? What 2 or 3 things, if any, could put them up to Super Bowl contenders? It would take a lot for me to put the Steelers. A lot would have to happen this offseason for me to even think that this team would be even more than back in last year's situation of can they win a playoff game?
And even division contenders. I mean, yes, I agree they are division contenders, but they are in their longest drought of failing to win the division since the 80s. And I believe early 90s. There was a 7-year stretch. And so are they even when the odds come out next year, and I know Pittsburgh routinely surpasses the odds, but they're going to be the 3rd highest rated team to win the North. It's going to be Baltimore 1, Bengals 2, Steelers 3,
Correct.
Cleveland 4. And I don't think anything could happen this offseason that's going to change that.
I agree.
And it's going to be like Pittsburgh, a clear third. I think Baltimore will be the favorite, Cincinnati behind, but I don't think they'll be significantly behind with a healthy Burrow and build up that defense some. I think Pittsburgh will be a clear third team. So how seriously are they even as division contenders right now?
Right. I mean, you're talking about a situation where they would have to be a third team in the AFC North to make the playoffs.
I mean, they could still be the second
Right.
team. It's always close. It's always competitive. But if there was a time to win the division, it was this year when they were 10-3, first place, needing just to beat Baltimore in Week 16. They lock up the division. They don't do it. Baltimore's going to continue to be strong. I think the Bengals will get better. I mean, they were 9-8. They had a great end of the season. Again, Pittsburgh, yes. Are they division contenders? Could they do it? Yes. I mean, I'll put them in that camp, but they are the weakest of those three teams, I think, to do so. The Ravens, the Steelers, and the Bengals. And so, how do they get to Super Bowl? I mean, it sounds so trite and cliche, but quarterback. Like, how else? What is the path otherwise to do it? Unless you have like a stupid elite defense and a great ground game, which two things I don't expect Pittsburgh to have in 2025. Not together.
All right. The next bullet point here he has is Art did not instill a lot of confidence for changes coming this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with the coaching staff, it's going to be pretty much intact. There's not going to be any radical changes, even if another positional coach at best exits or they bring in some assistant. I mean, I think the roster itself will have a good amount of turnover given the high number of internal and pending free agents. But I mean, in some fairness to them, they have made a bunch of changes. This has not been a stagnant team. I mean, they had 7 new coaches come in last year. They had a whole new quarterback room. I mean, they made a lot of changes. I think right after, I think 2023, after Omar's first full year, you saw a lot of roster changes there. You saw a lot of coaching changes last year. You saw a decent amount of roster changes as well. So, you can only turn this thing over so many times. But I do think the roster will look fairly different in 25.
All right, I agree. The next bullet point he has here is: do you know if Riley Mills from Notre Dame is in the draft? He says injury issues aside, do you think he is a fit? Is he draftable or a possible free agent? I think didn't Mills declare for the draft? Let me see if I can. I thought he did declare for the draft. Trying to find out real quick.
Yes, he's in the draft. Yes, Riley Mills is draft eligible.
He's got a while to overcome that injury, doesn't he?
It was a knee injury. I never found out the specifics of it. He didn't finish out the playoff run, so I don't know the details on that. Obviously, combine medical checks, rechecks will be
we've already got
him.
a scouting.
Mhm.
Jonathan Hightower just near the end of January did a. I mean, he looks like a fit at 6 foot. We don't have any measurement from him from any of these All-Star games, obviously, right?
Right, he didn't attend. I had talked about him a while back during the season. That would be a potential guy to look at that would seem to fit and check those boxes. So health, unfortunate for him. But yeah, that certainly would be a potential fit from a height, weight, play style standpoint.
All right. He says, I heard Alex's assessment of OSU quarterback. How does he compare to the IU quarterback? IU is big, very accurate passer with limited mobility, but apparently played with ACL issues. I think he could have a 4th round consideration. I have not studied the IU quarterback. Have you?
I haven't watched Rourke
Curtis
yet.
Rourke?
Yeah, I have not turned on his tape yet.
I have not. So check back with us on that as we get into the offseason here. He says, I'm with Dave. Bring in 4 or 5 undrafted free agent running backs and let them compete. Pay more than recent years and live with salary cap concerns. Would additional payments to undrafted player also help meet the cash requirements? Here's the thing about cash and giving additional payments to undrafted free agents. Whatever that additional money is not going to move the cash needle a lot. More than anything, what you'd be doing is just guaranteeing the money to attract them to sign with you. And obviously, if you ended up cutting those guys, the guaranteed money would still be as a cash expenditure. But it's not like you're talking about millions of dollars with these guys. It all looks great on paper and sounds great. Me saying bring in 4 or 5 undrafted free agent running backs and let them compete, but the reality of that is we're probably not going to see that happen.
Yeah, they're going to draft somebody mid-round. Will they add an undrafted free agent? I'm sure, but it's not going to be this big job fair where they bring in 5 different guys to compete.
All right. This one from Bryce says, so since Mike Tomlin loves position flexibility so much on the offensive line, here's a suggestion. If they like Dan Moore so much, they give him the Becton senior treatment and get him to make the move to left guard and see if he'll sign long-term to play that new position. Slide him there, put Jones back at left tackle, get Fautano in at right tackle, Frazier at center, and McCormick at right guard. That's your line. Allows you to move on from Sayamalo if you want to do that. There's your fix, he says. Yeah, I'm going to bet that we're not going to spend a lot of time on this email.
Yeah, Moore's going to hit free agency. If you pay him as a guard, the guard market's red hot. There's a big projection. Obviously, he can even play left guard. He's been super comfortable at left tackle. You have Sayamalu there. It's not going to happen. And Becton's again a guy that's huge and super strong and a great run blocker. Moore's not a bad run blocker, but he's not at Becton levels, and so I don't really see the comparison being 1-to-1.
Kevin in Erie writes in, love the content. Keep it up. Your discussion on Friday about NFL coaching rankings got me thinking most of the top coaches on your list have elite quarterbacks, right? Which makes me wonder if we give too much credit or blame to coaches based on their quarterback situation. He says, I ran some quick numbers on Steelers coaches without their Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Chuck Noll pre and post Bradshaw had a 475 winning percentage, 86 and 95. Bill Cowher pre-Ben, 120 and 79 for a 603 winning percentage. Mike Tomlin post-Ben, 47 and 37, 559 winning percentage. Would your rankings change if you factored in quarterback situations? Just curious to hear your thoughts. Fun fact here is another coach without his Hall of Fame quarterback, Bill Belichick with no Brady, 83 and 101, 451 winning percentage. He makes a lot of great points there, and it is hard. It is hard to look at success and quality of head coaches without looking at the quarterbacks that they had.
Sure. Again, it's obvious to everybody the importance of quarterback, and if you don't have one as a franchise, no matter how good of a coach you have, no matter how strong your roster is, otherwise it is just really hard to win and win consistently, compete for a Super Bowl title. My pushback to that would be yes, understanding these teams that have great quarterbacks makes a coach, makes a team look better. Mike Tomlin's job is to find a quarterback. And I get that is so much harder to do. It is so easy to sit there and say, and to me to put on my head coach hat and say, if I was a head coach, Dave, I would simply just find a franchise quarterback. Incredibly difficult to do. But that is his job. That's what he gets paid to do. And that's the key to success. And so knowing especially that Mike Tomlin drives his roster, influences the roster, who comes in, who does not, all that kind of stuff. He has a lot of power on how this roster is constructed and who gets drafted, who gets signed. That's his job. And so if they can't find a quarterback, that is partially on Mike Tomlin. He's got to be responsible for that fact.
I guess an interesting thing to talk about here. A good job on this, KP. Appreciate the stats. I'm assuming his stats are right. We don't have time to go search these down, but we'll assume Kevin in Erie is correct with these, and I would imagine he researched these pretty good here overall. So let's assume that his stats post and pre-Ben with when it comes to Cowher here. Let's talk about Chuck Noll post Bradshaw, Alex. Would you assume that Chuck Noll had a lot of say of who the Steelers went after or drafted when it came to the quarterback position after Bradshaw?
Sure, that seems fair.
All right. And let's do you remember who let's see, you had Mark Malone. Oh Lord.
Bobby Brister.
Oh Lord.
Todd Blackledge. Drafted by the Steelers.
Blackledge. Oh, I'm trying to remember who else was in that long list. Do you have it pulled up, the quarterbacks?
I can. Just give me 1 second. He was drafted by the Chiefs. Blackledge was. He came to Pittsburgh
but either free agency or draft, I would imagine.
I mean, leading passers over that time: Brister, Malone, O'Donnell was there for Knowles last year. Cliff Stout, remember Cliff Stout? So those are, I mean, there's some others as well, but those are some of the leading passers over that time
Oh,
frame.
David Woodley. Remember David Woodley?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Steve Bono,
Right.
Blackledge, Brister, Tomzek. Ooh.
Yeah, it was
All right.
they obviously that's why they didn't win a Super Bowl. They didn't compete because they didn't do it until Ben.
All right. What about Bill Cowher and the say that he had pre-Ben?
You may remember that better than I do. Obviously, him and Tim Donahoe butted heads. That led to Donahoe's exit to bring in Colbert in 2000. So Cowher may have had less control, but you probably can speak to that better than I'm able to.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the age of the internet and all like that. Not having a lot. Let's see. Cowher came in 1992. The quarterbacks. Where's that list of quarterbacks that I just had? Starting in 1992. O'Donnell, and Brister. O'Donnell, Tomzak. 95. O'Donnell. So you went through the first. Then Tomzak, Jim Miller, Cordell Stewart. They brought in Kent Graham, Tommy Maddox, 2002, and that was kind of a flyer coming off of the XFL. Would you, of the three, of Noel, Cowher, and Tomlin, obviously Cowher and we all know the story about the Roethlisberger and Dan Rooney saying, "Why don't you look at the quarterback?" I guess what I'm getting at is who had less say probably in quarterback choices of those three, either pre or post. It had to be Cowher, right?
Yeah, I mean, just based off of what I know, and there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff we have to try to wade through to get to that answer. It's probably safe to say Cowher's last on that list.
All right. Interesting nonetheless. I mean, I get his point here, and I don't think anybody would argue with him, right? Other than to say that, yeah, Mike, what you said is Mike Tomlin's job at this point, and since the late days of Ben on, is to find that next quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, that's just yeah. Again, it's hard, obviously, and you saw how long it took to go from Bradshaw to Ben. It went decades, and God help us if it takes that long again. Hopefully, it won't. But that is the job. It is like, just to do a little crosswave here. It's like the Luka trade in the NBA this weekend, which was easily the most shocking trade I can remember, not just in basketball, but in American sports in a super long time. The Lakers know they have to replace LeBron James. He is 40 years old. This may be his last year with Los Angeles. They need to find that star of the future. They make a deal for Luka, and that seems to have fallen in their laps, and it's insane. Dallas did that, I think. Not that I'm a basketball aficionado or anything, but point is they have found their future, and Pittsburgh will have to do the same.
All right, one more from Mike Shorter here. It says, love the podcast and the website. Jerome Bettis was on another podcast and said most teams in the playoffs have franchise running backs. Cook, Barkley, Pacheco, Henry, etc. Backs that run between the tackles and can get the edge. Najee was more between the tackles, and I'm not sure what Warrant is yet, he writes. Who are the franchise running backs in this draft? What rounds in the draft? From Mike Shorter. Okay. Obviously have not made it all the way through the running backs, but let's read off. I know ESPN, for whatever it's worth, just released their kind of top 5 running backs book from all of their draft nicks, if you will. It seems to be a general consensus here, or not general. The consensus of Kuiper, Miller, Reed, and Yates are that Ashton Genty is the top running back in this draft class. Then it kind of splits off from there. Marion Hampton out of North Carolina, all of them have in their top 5. A couple of these guys have him either second or third. Let's see. Judkins is on a few of these lists. Travion Henderson from Ohio State is on a few of these lists. It kind of gets split off from there. One of them, Kuiper, has LaQuint Allen out of Syracuse and Dylan Sampson from Tennessee in his top 5. They all have Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina on their list. One of them has Caleb. Let's see. Two of them have Caleb Johnson on their list out of Iowa. So, I think it goes without saying that you're going to see Ashton Jeanty near the top. You're going to see both of the Ohio State running backs talked about quite a bit. Caleb Johnson probably going to be top 5 within this list, and then it kind of splits off in various directions from there.
I think to answer the question, based on what we know now, the one franchise running back is Ashton Jeanty. The other guys I would not consider being viewed as franchise guys. They're unlikely to be first round picks, or maybe somebody goes late, 31, 32, which has happened. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, those types of guys. Maybe something like that occurs, but even then, it seems unlikely. So the one franchise guy is Jeanty, and that's why he's going to be a first round pick and potentially a top 15 type of player. I mean, yeah, Bettis is correct. Those teams all have really good running backs, but I would just say, when did those running backs get added? After the franchise quarterback, after the offensive line was invested in and built up. Pacheco, Barkley, Cook, those guys came. They were some of the last pieces to the puzzle, and that's where I think teams have to build running backs. Running backs have value; they can put you over the top and really be a good asset. I think Dave and I would disagree a little bit on the fungibility aspect of it all, but I do think it is the cherry on the sundae, not the ice cream itself.
All right. Other than as much as I know about this running back class right now has been written in the few draft profiles that we have right now. Is there any running back other than Jeanty that you would slam dunk and say the Steelers need to seriously think about this guy in the first round?
In the first round, no. It's just Jeanty in terms of the talent, and obviously I think Pittsburgh's in a position where they are not cherry on Sunday mode. Even if Jeanty was there, as talented as he is, would they do it? I don't know, maybe. But would I do it? Pittsburgh is simply not in position to take a running back in the first round.
So we're back to second, third, fourth round, maybe if they draft a. They're going to draft a running back, though, right?
Yes, I believe mid rounds. I keep saying mid rounds. That's probably more like fourth, fifth. But day 2 to early day 3, second to fourth round is the range I think a running back will get drafted in.
All right. Mike, we'll obviously learn more about this running back class as we get deeper into this thing and all, and we can look back at this. But wanted to make sure I got to your email today.
I think just quickly some names that fit: Devin Neal from Kansas, R.J. Harvey, UCF. Of course, the Ohio State running backs are going to be probably in contention as well. Good running back class. It's a good running back class. It's one of the best in a long time. But in terms of the franchise guys, it's still really just one, and that's Jeanty. But most running back classes don't even have a franchise guy. So the fact that it does is unique in itself, and that's where I think Jeanty's going to be a top 15 type of guy.
I guess because we mentioned one of the outside linebackers from the Johnny Walker from the Shrine Bowl the other day. Mark Chapman writes in, "Hey, make sure you guys check out Mike Green out of Marshall." Says he opened up a can of whoop ass at the East-West practices. He says he could be a sleeper for the Steelers. He's probably going to go a little bit higher than where they want to draft. Talented kid. We'll talk more about him in this coming week when we talk to the guys from the East-West Shrine Bowl.
Probably going to be a first-round guy, especially with the week that he had down in Mobile. So Pittsburgh's just not going to simply be in position. Good player, fun player,
right. Totally
with you, reader, but just not going to be in the cards for Pittsburgh.
All right, I think we managed to chew up an hour and a half here, Alex. Anything else to add?
No, we always find a way to talk it through. And so we'll come back Wednesday, Friday. Still talk some Steelers stuff, any topical news, any linebacker coach searching, and so forth. But we'll also have hopefully hour-long roundtables to really recap the Shrine and Senior Bowl from the guys that were down there and gals that were down there in Texas and Alabama.
All right, sounds like a plan. So in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter /X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button, upper right navigational bar. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button. Follow the directions that way. We have a iOS app at the App Store, Apple App Store right now for free. If you want to partake in checking that out for us. And until Wednesday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.